Hello, today is April 21st, 2009. We're meeting today with Mr. Roland Young at his home in Fort Morgan, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Roland, and I understand you go by Swede.
Yes, that's a nickname.
Okay.
I've had it since I was a child.
How'd you get that?
Well, I was just real white-headed as a youngster, and I don't know, all my friends and that picked it up, calling me Swede.
Do you have Swedish background at all?
Well, some of them, none whatsoever. But some of them called me Cotton or Swede, I've had it all my life.
All right. Well, Swede, let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
I was born 5/27/25, and on a farm north of Russell, Kansas. And I didn't have a doctor out there. There was a midwife, and I've been told, that is. Anyway, it was, I think if I recall, it was on a Wednesday in the evening. As I recall my folks telling me, my dad died when I was 3.
Is that right?
My mother raised me on the farm. I had a total of 9 children in our family, and
what
I
rank
was last. I was the last of the group. I was the youngest, and there was like 3 girls ahead of me, and the rest of my 5 brothers. So there's 9 of us kids.
And your mom raised you all by herself?
Well, yeah.
And I imagine the boys helped out as well. And
after was, I don't know. I was probably 4th, 5th grade. Why, my mother had to take care of my grandmother in town in Russell, so we moved into town, and she took care of the grandmother, and started going to school in there, and I got acquainted with Kenneth Doe.
Okay.
Which is Bob Doe's brother.
That's right.
And we was a block apart in town. We was good friends, neighbors. He was at my house, I was at his sometimes. He was younger than Kenny. Kenny was younger than Bob.
That's right.
2 years younger. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. It was raised there.
Finished school there in Russell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I didn't get to finish. I had to get into the Navy. I volunteered. I had 2 years of high school and volunteered with a minority cruise, which I didn't quite spend 4 years in the service. I was 17, and it was to...
Now, at 17, did your mom have to sign off for you
right,
then? Or?
Right.
How'd she feel about doing that?
Well, I'd already had 3 brothers in the service. So, and I was gung-ho. You can't stop me.
Now, how much longer after Pearl Harbor did you enlist? Was that...
Well, see, it was December of 41, and I went in 42. I guess the first day of my service was on Halloween, October the 31st in 1942.
Do you remember, did you enlist by yourself, or did you and a bunch of buddies go in, or how did you?
No, I was by myself. I went in as there was no group of us. There was several from different towns right around, and we sort of had a group leader.
Okay.
And we went in through Kansas City and then Great Lakes.
And that's where you did your basic there at Great Lakes?
Basic training at Great Lakes.
Now how did, let me ask you this, how did a boy right smack in the middle of the country in landlocked Kansas end up joining the Navy? How did you come to choose that branch of service?
Well, my dad was in the Navy.
Oh, was he? Okay.
He was fought in the Spanish-American War.
Is that right?
Right. And I had a brother that was at Pearl Harbor. And then I had another brother that was in the Seabees. And I had another brother that was Army Engineers.
Well, let me ask you this, and that's one question I forgot to ask you earlier. Was your brother at Pearl when it got attacked?
Yes.
What was your initial thought when you guys first heard that Pearl had been attacked, coupled with the fact that your brother's there?
I'd heard it on the radio that Pearl Harbor was being attacked, and it scared the heck out of me.
I'll bet. How long did it take before you realized that your brother was found out how your brother was doing? Or
Oh golly, it seemed like it was forever.
oh boy.
It seemed like it was forever. But probably 2 weeks or more.
Oh,
Well,
it must have been something else. It must have been terrible waiting that long.
He was on the Detroit.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, so you enlist, you go off to Great Lakes. How was that transition going from civilian life to military life
Tough.
for you? Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd been raised pretty much on a farm, and I kind of still felt like farm was my life.
Well, how was that too? I'll ask that as we go further into the interview. But a lot of people in your generation didn't really travel too much away. You probably didn't travel too far away from the farm. Now you're off, in Michigan. Did homesickness kick in at all, or?
Oh, you're too busy.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they kept you going. I would say at least 15 hours a day, probably from 5:30 or earlier till sometimes way late at night, and they kept you on and the recruits. They always had. They call Navy. They'll call everybody was Mac, and you was always at that point in time, you was scum of the earth, more or less.
Yeah.
All you are is dumb, and you don't know nothing. And we got to teach you from brushing your teeth to comb your hair. Of course, you didn't have no hair. They cut it all off, which is their normal routine. They say how you want it cut, and then you say, leave a little bit on top. Okay, here it is. They'd cut it off, which is just a bunch of people that had a little more time in the Navy than we had.
Yeah.
They were barbers, but they had a good time of doing things like that. Everything had to be so neat and clean. Your shoes shined, and they'd do everything to get you in the world to get you dirty doing things. And you had to be clean.
Yeah.
And you come in for inspection. With an inspection, and you had a speck of dirt anywhere, or the barracks had dirt. Oh, you'd get some kind of punishment.
Huh.
We had one guy that never did know left from right, and he was always just a half a step out all the time, and we'd always try to get him back to the barracks when we had field drill. We'd try to get him back to the barracks with some kind of duty, so we wouldn't be having penalties for somebody being out of step.
So from Great Lakes, where did you go?
I got into the Armed Guard and was sent to Biloxi, Mississippi, Armed Guard training for gunners on merchant ships,
Okay.
which these merchant ships now, I guess, needs gunners. They need some kind of protection. And I got, 6 weeks of training there, and was sent up to
What big gunnery training?
Yes.
Okay.
like 20 millimeters and anti-aircraft guns
Okay.
and stuff. and 50 caliber. Even learned handguns and the whole thing. In fact, I have a Navy E, which is one of the efficient members of the United States Navy, which there is very few of them. As a Navy,
like a marksman type
efficiency, award? They call it excellence.
Wow.
And excellence mainly in big guns, like 5-inch, and
oh, wow.
anti-aircraft guns and handguns for that. There's very few people in the Navy that's got it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And anyway, we went to Armed Guard Center in Brooklyn, New York, and got where they assigned each person with a group of, I think it was 24 to each ship.
Okay.
They'd assign them to there with an officer. And most generally you had a first-class petty officer that was in charge of the group of men, and the rest of us was young and learning. All of us was seamen, what they call it, second class or first class seamen. And we get assigned to a ship, and the first one I ever got to was an old freighter going to North Africa. And we went to Casablanca with a load of ammunition, bombs, and all.
Boy, talking about riding on a powder keg, huh?
Right.
Well, let me ask you, once again, here's a farm boy from Kansas going out to sea. How was that for you? Did you get your sea legs, or how did...
I didn't have much trouble. Never was seasick.
Is that right?
Never seasick. And it was kind of tough. Once in a while the seas or a storm up. It was hard to hold your balance, and most generally, if it was real bad, we'd have lifelines to the forward guns. We most generally cover them up if it was up forward. Well, we'd try to cover those guns up, but the ones up in the center of the ship, on the structure in the center of the ship, they was all open and manned all the time. The ones in the back was always manned. So we had a good crew at all times. And most all our heavier guns, like 3-inch 50s and 4-inch, was surface or aircraft. So we had a chance, if it was submarine, which as we was going into Casablanca on the first runaround, which we thought was spotted as a periscope.
Oh, geez.
Well, we was young, dumb, and didn't know better. It was a sound buoy that we shot up.
Oh.
So, we didn't get no points on that trip.
Well, how did that play on you, though? I mean, I would think here you're crossing the Atlantic that's infested with U-boats, coupled with the fact, like you said, you're loaded down riding on a powder keg. Did it ever cross your mind that, boy, we're hit, I'm gone? I mean,
Well, you knew that right away as soon as you knew what they was loading on board ship. Well, if you ever get hit, you're not coming back. So you might as well go with the flow, you know. There is nothing you're assigned there. You might just well. And after we got into Casablanca, and they unloaded all this, and there was Arabs, and they had old cranes and stuff there to unload the ship. They put a little balance in the bottom of the ship and send us back in to the Mediterranean, back in to Algiers and Benassaf and Bone, and we picked up Italian prisoners and German prisoners and all that, and we started hauling them back. So Germans had all kinds of airplanes at that point, and we got into several good big raids where they would try to bomb us. And you couldn't run with a light or anything at night because it just, right away, it would show you to the point, I'm a target.
Yeah. Wow. Holy cow.
So, anyway, well, it was very interesting. That's how I picked up the coins. I'll later on show you. And this was my first run. And then after that, we went to England and several other places. Made a real fast run to Murmansk, Russia, which there was 2 other ships, but we was the only one left when we got there.
Wow.
And
because that's a treacherous path, and up in the North Atlantic, and
right.
Oh boy.
And the time we got out of there, that ship was all iced over, and it was just real bad. First cold, and the strange thing about this, when we was in there and they got our ship unloaded out whatever supplies, I don't remember exactly what they were at this time, but they never would let us get off the dock area. We couldn't go into town or anything. And so I said, there's something wrong with this picture. I think we're fighting the wrong people. They're against us right now in Russia there.
Wow. Wow.
And then we come back out of there, and it was so iced over, and everything was froze over. You couldn't hardly get heat to the back of the ship or anything. Steam lines and that going, and everything was freezing up.
How about your own comfort? Were you uncomfortable enough with clothing and heat and such?
You had heavy, foul weather gear specially issued for that trip, but it was not enough.
Were you outside manning your gun this whole time, or how?
No. We kept people alert out to do it, but you couldn't have stayed out in that weather over about 10, 15 minutes at a time. Yes. And when you had weather coming up, the salt water'd even freeze up, and your ship was just a pile of ice.
I'll be damned.
And
now, these crossings, did you make with the same ship the whole time? Or
no.
Yeah.
Each time you'd go back in, and you'd get assigned to a new ship.
Oh, okay.
You might be in there 1, 2, or 3 days, or maybe a week, and you'd be assigned to another ship, and you'd be out. And you'd have to check out all your gunnery and everything, your ammunition, and what each.
Now, would you guys move as a group, or could you be every time? Would you assign?
No, you're assigned different groups every time.
Oh, okay.
And the last one I had in the armed guard, I just left New York for England, and I got attack appendicitis. So
while at sea.
While at sea.
Ooh, boy.
So when it really hit me, I was on watch, and when it really hit me, the appendix, and we was just right out of New York, not too far. We was going up Canadian coast and then up to Halifax and then go back. But we was way out far enough out to sea. So anyway, they transferred me with one of them lifelines from one ship to a Norwegian destroyer, which was in our convoy, over a lifeline in a basket from one ship to the other. And that destroyer took me into Halifax, Nova Scotia. I was running a fever of 106.4.
Wow.
They had to pack ice on it down there before they could operate on it.
I'll be darned.
But that was the last one. And then when I got back, and I don't know, I hinted that I'd rather do something to get out of that type. I'd rather get into the fleet. And so got assigned to a group of people sent us to Newport News, Rhode Island, and we was assigned to the USS Franklin. It wasn't even completely built at that time. And
But Newport News, Rhode Island or
Rhode
Virginia?
Island. No, Rhode Island.
Oh, okay.
So we got in there, and it was found out it was just another boot camp, and there's a bunch of us sailors that had pretty well up with quite a bit of experience, and especially we'd been in battle. And as soon as we got there, all these recruits and all that, some of us was petty officers, and some of them wasn't, just first class seamen, and these ones that just recruits, you'd go out on the street and they'd start saluting you and everything else, We was a bunch of old salts, I guess they'd call it. Anyway, we had quite a time there. We spent quite a time there, and they transferred us down to North Fork, Virginia, it's Newport News, Virginia. And that's where the Franklin was. That's where it was commissioned at. And we went down there, and we was there during the commissioning of the ship, and they had it out of dry dock and into to where it splashed into the water.
Oh, and this is an aircraft carrier, right?
Aircraft
Boy,
carrier.
that must have been a sight.
Yeah, it was something that was the most beautiful ship I'd ever seen. Because most generally our things over there in North Atlantic was just destroyers or escort destroyers, and all we had just a little bit of protection with the merchant ships, and so this is a big old aircraft carrier, and about as long as a football field, I guess, something like that, and we got aboard that after its commission, went on a shakedown cruise, and
To those watching the film, a shakedown cruise is where you go out and kind of work the bugs out. And,
right.
Okay.
We spent I suppose months, 6 weeks out and finding out where all the problems was, repairing them, and getting it ready for battle.
Okay. Now, did you go on again as a gunnery specialist? Was your?
Well, yes, I was in the gunnery.
Okay.
So I stayed in gunnery, and we left North Fork, Virginia, and we went around through the Panama Canal.
Ooh, describe that. What was that like?
Oh, it's amazing when you think, well, there's not really any way in the world that you can do that. But they put that ship, and it's just as wide as a canal. They had to take the edges of the elevators off and everything to get it through the canal. And you go into a place, take the water out, put the water, let you go into a next station, build it up, and then you go into the next station. And they take you all the way plumb across the area. There's the middle of it, you could sail through there, but the ends where the locks was, you'd have to pick you up and lower you down.
I'll be darned.
And it all done by pumps and everything. So it was. So we got around, went around through the canal and got us on the west coast. And it wasn't long till we got a few more ships and got on out to Hawaii, and then got into a convoy, a big convoy of about 70 ships.
Now, when you got out to Hawaii, did you have a chance to get on land? Was your brother still there in Hawaii when you?
Well,
did you ever chance to get?
no,
chance to link up with him?
he'd been really assigned to the Indiana. He'd been assigned to Battle Wagon, Indiana. He was a gunner also, and so he was off. I later on, I got with him one night. I got to be able to go from my ship to his ship when we was in Guam, I think. I think that was the place we were. Anyway, well, I did get to see him one night.
Okay.
But on the other hand, when we got into this convoy, we had no idea what the heck, never seen so many.
That must have been a sight.
I mean, these are all warships.
Wow.
We was in convoys with 40, 50 merchant ships,
Yeah.
but this is a fleet.
Wow, that must have been a sight.
And we started going from island to island, I mean.
Now, would you know where you were going? Would they tell you where you were going? Or
You
you just
never know
Yeah.
until you're right at the island. They'll tell you where you were. You couldn't carry a camera. You couldn't.
keep a diary.
No diary, no nothing. There was nothing. And every 2 or 3 weeks we could get mail.
Yeah, how was that? Since you were traveling all over the place, was that pretty consistent? Were you getting mail back and forth from home, or how did that work out?
It was like 2 or 3 weeks sometimes, maybe sometimes more. We left, it was like 6 months before we got back to any kind of, and on the first time when we got, I forget just where it seemed like in a Wichita, or no, maybe not, I don't remember just where we were hit the first time. And we had to come back to Birmingham, Washington and get repaired. They repaired the ship and went back out. And that's when we really got it. And
Well, talk about that first time you got hit. What happened there? Can you give us a rough idea what how badly were you hit?
A suicide bomber hit us, and it was pretty well got a fire and all that kind of stuff. But we was lucky we had planes out when we got hit this last time. A lot of the planes was in. We just started to launch. They had
We'll talk about that. We'll get to that story because I think we want to talk a little bit about that because that's a pretty incredible story. But so you got hit. You went back to Washington. Did that during repairs? Did that give you enough time for a leave to come home? Or
I got to come home. I think round trip was 21 days, which railroad, and layover and like Denver, and time you got back on another train, got out to Russell. Of course, everybody then when you got there, everybody, you're a hero.
Wow.
But that's here or there. What the people didn't know didn't hurt them. Because if they'd have known that, some of the risks, like ship loaded with ammunition here, they didn't know it. So
Yeah.
all of that is in the past. So I don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah. So you went home, got back. You guys got repaired, went back out to sea. Talk a little bit about what life was like on the ship, as far as your living conditions, your food, what you guys did for entertainment, and such.
Rules, and that was very, very strict.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Very Navy, and we had an admiral aboard at all times.
Much more strict than on those merchant ships, huh?
Oh, there was no regulations there. We did as we, and they furnished on merchant ships. We went in, sat down, they fed us. You know, it was almost anything if they had it, they'd give you to eat, and the food was great. You know, and there was, and then when you went over into the other end of the real Navy way, we got a lot of times beans for breakfast and stuff like that,
huh.
which you know, it was a lot different, and the food, you had plenty of it, you know, you had plenty of food, and if we was out at times at sea, we'd have a ship pull up alongside, and they'd transfer with lines.
Much like you were transferred when you were sick.
Right.
Yeah.
With,
Okay.
With provisions, and there'd be tankers pull up alongside of you and fill you back up with fuel, and he was out. You know, they pull away, and you're out into.
Do you remember how some of on the various trips you took, how many days you were out to sea at times?
Well, like I say, at one time we didn't come in for 6 months.
Is that right? Wow. And these are virtually floating cities pretty much too, right?
Well, no, I take that. I'm mistaken. The little old island of Inawetok, they pulled in there, and we got to go ashore, but that island was shot plumb clean. All there was sand and a few palm trees left that was broke off, and but there was nothing. And you'd have 3 beer party, you know, you'd get 3 beers. But there was a lot of old landing craft and stuff like that along the edges, and that you could swim out to kind of see what was left of them.
Wow. Huh.
But there wasn't a lot to just, they're on that old burn your brains out in that sand.
Wow. Wow. How about sleeping conditions, accommodations on the ship? Were they comfortable? Do you feel like you got enough sleep during?
Well, you didn't really get enough sleep, never. Most generally, our watches was like we'd spend 2 on and 8 off, 2 on and 8 off, and then when you got into battle areas, you was 4 on, 4 off, 4 on, 4 off.
Hmm.
And if you was on general quarters,
You just stayed there.
You just stayed there.
Oh boy.
Sometimes they'd get coffee to you. Sometimes, general quarters, they locked up all the hatches. Everything was, you know, where if we got hit into one compartment, the other compartments was sealed off. But it was. Nobody went anywhere but right to general quarters, and you stayed there.
Mm. Wow. Wow. So you took that first hit, went to Washington for repairs, came back, and then were you in any more battles before the big hit took you, or?
Well, see, the biggest part of that, most all of our time was from the time we left there. We'd went through like Guam and all those islands there, and this was, I think, off the Philippines where we got hit. I can't remember for sure just what island or Philippine or what where we got hit, but we got hit by one kamikaze, and so we had been in from the time we left there till we come back to Birmingham, Washington. We'd been almost always at some, and we had pilots aboard that ship that was what they called ACE. Several times over.
Really?
Yeah, they could get two planes, two Japanese planes in one day.
Wow. Uh-huh.
Because we'd be out far enough away from the islands when them Japs had come to us. We'd be most generally headed toward them. By the time they got to us, close enough to us, our planes would take out. We'd be full of gas. Our planes would be full of gas, and they could shoot them down because they didn't have enough gas, just barely enough gas in their planes to get back to their airports that they was on them islands, and they couldn't really do a lot of fighting because they'd run out of gas, and they'd try to run back to home and back to their base, and American boys would shoot them down. In fact, I think that's probably the most decorated ship there was in the Navy.
Is that right? Yeah.
Right.
Now, would you mingle at all with the pilots? Did you get to know any of those guys, or they pretty much stayed themselves?
I went on a gunnery a few times with them, and it's quite an experience to get in the back seat with a gun, 50 caliber machine gun, in the back of a Helldiver, and they go over a battle wagon or.
Oh, they took you. You got to go up in one?
Oh yeah.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I got to go 2 or 3 times.
Really?
I was on standby in case that there was never enough. Somebody'd get downed or lost a gunner. Why? I was on standby.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
and that's the seat where you sat backwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a Helldiver.
Huh.
And it's the funniest feeling you ever wanted when they drop that nose over and go in to drop a bomb. You're almost straight down.
Wow.
And I don't know, I can't tell you anymore how many G's you're pulling out. And then you pull out, and there's shells exploding all the way around you and everything else. Sometimes you got bullet holes in your ship or in your airplane when you get back. But it's not a thing that you'd want to do every day.
I'll bet.
It's scary. It really is.
Well, I don't imagine. I imagine you probably hadn't flown too much prior to that, had you? Ever been in an airplane?
Well, not until I got on the Franklin, and I got on there, and I was in gunnery, and had a chance to volunteer to be on standby, so I took it. I wanted to go on one of them wind wagons.
I'll be darned. Wow.
Yeah, it was. You go off the end of a ship loaded with them, and sometimes it was so loaded it'd almost hit the water before it could get enough speed up to go. Now they catapult them off there, and them jets is hot anyway.
Wow. Huh.
But
so
you, it's not like any kind of a amusement ride that you'd ever go on. Maybe if it was nobody shooting back at you or anything like, you'd enjoy it a lot more. But it pull your old heart plumb under your chin.
What's it like for people like myself and others that'll watch this that have no idea what it's like to be shot at and be in war? What's going through your mind when something like that's going on? I mean, what are you thinking? And I'm just trying to imagine what this is like.
It's just like somebody's gonna hit you. You got defense. That's what you're thinking. Well, I can outsmart him, or I can get away from him, or I can shoot him down, or whatever. And on our main job on the aircraft carrier on the 5-inch 38, I was in 5-inch 38 turret-mounted twin mounts,
Now, is that one of those that's enclosed, or are you out in the open?
Enclosed.
Oh, geez.
Enclosed. I was mount captain on a 5-inch 38, and it's all enclosed except for me. It's out the top, and all the guys that's on the inside, they're handling ammunition, putting it in, and getting. If we're not on radar, say you could get it on automatic, and they'd flip it wherever radar was.
Oh, okay.
But if you was on your own, why, I'd have to tell them how far out, what kind of range, and that kind of thing, and what elevation. And the pointers and the trainers would pick it up in their sights, and they could see what I was after, you know. And
I imagine it had to be noisy as hell in one of those things, or was it?
well, I wish you could see. You had the great big old earphones and a war bonnet, what we call them, a war bonnet over your head, and with great big old, that covered them great big earphones and all that. And
I imagine it had to be hot and humid inside that thing, or a stove in there.
That was the least of your worries.
Oh, was it? Jeez.
That was the least of your worries. Whether he was hot, he was always a nervous kid. Hardly wait. You're ready to do something, and if it didn't happen, well, you're just like an ant on the hot sand.
Wow.
And all the guys work together. You know, it's like one movement where everybody does at the same time. And there's elevators coming up from down down below the magazines. They load these elevators up and bring your ammunition right up into the gun turret, regardless of which way you're turning. You got this ammunition coming up, and if you would have got caught in there, like when that ship was hit, and fire all around it and everything, I can show you what it does. There's some pictures there that you can see. I also got if you'd like to take it sometime and look at it, send it back to me, a video of the Franklin.
Okay.
If you send it back, it'd be
Oh, you bet. Well, let's talk about, I mean, maybe I'm getting too far ahead, but in the story, but when you guys finally took the big hits, or is there some story before that? Am I getting too far ahead of myself?
We got back into service and joined another convoy after we left there. We lost another convoy, another task force, ships. And it was at the time when they're starting to bomb Japan. And we were on our first major battles after coming from being repaired. We was on our first one, and we'd been off Japan for I think 3 or 4 days, 5 days, something like that, where the planes was coming in, reloading, going back, bombing, and doing this. And it was from early in the morning till late at night. And they would have all the planes off and then back on. They gas them up, and the way they gas them up, they got gas lines, hoses, just about like what you fill a car up with. To each one of those airplanes, that's the way they fill them up, with gas lines, hoses running all over the flight deck.
Boy, that flight deck must have been a dangerous place to be, with planes and propellers running and hoses every which way, and that must just. And you guys would be, your gun turret would be right there on the flight.
Just was probably where I was at, probably 20 feet above the flight deck, which is about 120 feet from the water.
Wow.
So, but we got in there, and I think it was on the 5th day, March 19th.
Of 45?
5. And we got hit like St. Patty's Day back in the States. So, the night before was St. Patty's. Everybody's out celebrating.
Yeah.
So the night before, so we was across the international date line, in other words.
Right, yeah, next day.
Yeah. So it was March 19th, and we'd been on general quarters for so long, and it was just got most generally at daylight is when you got to really start. It got light enough to where they said, well, let's secure everything and let everybody that's not on watch go eat and get refreshed a little bit, a shower or something, you know. So my luck was I was on watch. So I was at that 5-inch turret, and planes, there was 2 or 3 planes that just got off the flight deck, fighter planes. They'd get them out ahead of time, but none of the bombers or torpedo planes or none of them had left. They were still fueling, and it was real cloudy, misty, cold weather, and it kind of mist and snow, a flake or two now and then, and it was cold. You know, it wasn't real cold, but you know, it was cold.
Uncomfortable.
But they somehow or another, radar or nobody, there was one of them Japanese planes in the clouds, and he come in and dropped 2 bombs, one forward of the structure and one aft of the structure. And that just a little ways from my turret where I was in there, and the gas lines is coming out from just very close to where my turret is to all these planes. And as you'll see, there's some pictures of what I went through. So if I'd like to take a minute and just, well, anyway, when we get back here, I'll start as well as I can remember to describe the fuel lines was all out fueling the planes up, and we thought we was in good shape because most generally after it gets good in daylight weathers, no planes come in because we can keep better track of them.
And usually, though, in a formation, isn't the aircraft carriers usually in the middle and surrounded by cruisers and destroyers, aren't you?
Oh, you betcha.
So it must have been the clouds that plane was able to get unseen, or
unseen. Radar didn't pick it up. It was in the clouds, and it was a single plane. They didn't have many planes left.
Huh.
And he got a bomb right in forward of the substructure and one right behind it. And they said one of them went plumb in through the hangar, plumb down through the deck, down into the hangar deck. But all the gasoline and fire come with the airplanes all over the deck and bombs. And they just started with rockets. And some of them rockets would go shooting out and it was just a big ball of fire.
Oh,
and that fire was around my gun turret. Totally engulfed in fire. So the only thing I could do is get the crew out of that gun turret and say, let's go over.
And jump?
Jump.
And you said earlier you're, what, 120 feet above the water line?
Yes. So we all had life jackets on. You get a hold of your life jackets, tight as you can hold down, and you just jump over the side.
Wow.
And the thing is, make sure you're holding, or that life jacket will jerk your neck off. Break your neck in a heartbeat. So when we all got, in fact, there was one man lost in my crew.
Now, how big's your crew generally in there?
I think there was 14 of
For
us.
us?
And there was one man lost. We all made it, but then I was in the water for 5 hours and 25 minutes. Long time.
Jeez, yeah. I'm surprised you
The
didn't.
water was a lot warmer than the air.
Yeah, but still, you could have got hypothermia or something.
Oh, you was. You was.
So you watched all this unfold from the water. That you watched everything.
Right. And there was a group that saved the ship. There was a chaplain that was still in the forward area. There was a chaplain up there, and he gave last rites to a lot of people, but the sailors. And it was pretty disappointing in one thing. Later on, they got the ship back to the United States, and it was decommissioned and all of that. And the skipper was supposedly doing right, he thought, by not abandoning the ship. And the commanding admiral, which was on board ship when we got hit, said to abandon the ship. And he wouldn't do it.
Wasn't there some controversy that he accused a bunch of people of abandoning ship and we're going to court-martial them? And
Yeah, I was one of them people.
well, you had no choice. I mean, it wasn't like you'd been there for a while and jumped off. You had you were one of the first off. You had no choice. That was your only route, wasn't it?
That's the only time I could have. If I'd have stayed there, I'd have been ashes. But they was gonna have everybody arrested that went over. Not arrested, but they was gonna charge them with mutiny. This captain had enough nerve when they started cutting the ship up for scrap after a long time after, which is you find that very interesting when you see that CD. He had nerve enough to go back on that ship and pretend to be such a hero that he just had to save that ship. And it shows a bunch of the old guys years later when they went to destroy that ship, cut it up for iron, and they went back aboard there. It shows these older guys back on there, and they tell of their experiences, how they got off that ship or got forward of the fire and was able to be saved. Somehow or another they managed. But what happened when we first got hit and the fire broke out, the Santa Fe cruiser come in and just slashed right up to the side of that ship, and they took the admiral off that ship. It was a flagship. and they took him off that ship, and he later on they got back in and took a lot of people off that ship that was injured, and people was trying to get off. They come back, and after so long, several hours, why, I think it was a Pittsburghman took it under tow. Took this ship under tow, and they started pulling it till it get back up under its own power again, and get people manning the boilers and the engine room and all that. And they got it back under tow, and it finally made its own way to back to Pearl Harbor.
And it was listing pretty good at that point too, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was listing several. Well, I would say 20 degrees at least. It was really in bad shape, and
I think they say it was one of the worst damaged ships to ever come out of it without sinking, from what I've read, something like that.
Yeah, it was.
Well, let's back up before we continue on with that, the story of the Franklin itself, and let's get back to you and what's going on with you this whole time. Do you remember, how long did it take you, you're in your turret, how long did it take you to realize what had happened, that there's been an explosion, and you realize what was going on?
I would say there's probably 15 minutes from the time that ship until it was at the point
you had to make a decision to jump?
Had to make a decision.
Yeah.
I mean, there was fire and all that, and it was at the point we had steel structure around us, but it was starting to get hot. And there is a big hatch in the back of that turret where people get in and out of the turret.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all got there, and there's a railing right up there, and we all just got out just as fast as we could and gone over. Just as soon as we got out, go overboard. And I was picked up.
Yeah, how long? You said you're in the water for 5 hours?
5 hours and 25 minutes.
And was it what, you had no problem when you fell? I mean, from that height, it's almost hitting cement when you hit the water from that height. No problems with hurt legs, or you made the landing okay, I guess?
Well, yeah. I jumped off that flight deck a lot of times.
Oh, had you?
Like we'd be anchored somewhere, and we was all allowed to go swimming at times, and I had jumped off the
Oh, okay. All right.
That was part of, we got to the ones that wanted to do it. Some of them would go off the hangar deck. Some of the guys would try to, you wouldn't have a life jacket on at that point.
Yeah.
You'd just be, and you'd almost get out of breath before you get back up.
Oh, jeez, wow.
But the minute you hit the water, you have a tendency to throw your arms out to go back up. And if you'd keep them down to your side, you'd go way deep, but you'd have it. I'd been off that flight deck before, so it wasn't nothing new to me.
So you guys landed, when you fell into water, did you guys kind of stay together as a group, or what happened?
No. To begin with, the ship was still going on its own power.
Okay.
And it was sort of like it was turning, and I know I did. I had to swim like heck just to stay away from the prop.
Oh, jeez.
What do you call it?
The wake?
The wake of the prop and all that. Try to get away from it to throw you out away. It pushes you way out. Or if you're too close, it'd suck you under. But anyway, I got back out away from that, and we was out, probably hour or so, and there was a couple more planes come by and tried to scrape people that was in the water. But they didn't last very long. They was shot down, so it didn't. They didn't. When I was a long time in my life jacket, and those old K-pot life jackets was only good for about 3 hours or 4. And I finally crawled out of that, and it was slowly sinking me. So I crawled out of that and swam to had one of them cork nets floating in the water, and there was a couple of 3 guys on that net, and so I got over there on that, and it was colder there. The conditions was worse on the net, but than it was in being plumb into the water.
Wow. How much further ahead was the ship from you at this point? Did it head it before it finally came to a stop? Could you still see action? I mean,
I could still see the whole thing going on, and fire, and my God, it was just, you wouldn't believe it was just terrible. Explosions and after explosion after explosion, them bombs on them planes and everything going on. And it was like, I don't remember, but exactly the time that they picked me up. But after it kind of got checked up a little bit, and I don't know, I slept for quite a few hours afterwards.
How'd you get? Who picked you up? Did they come by in a lifeboat, or how'd you?
The destroyer, the Tingy 538. Won't forget it. But they picked us up, and they like I said, I was on that, and they pulled up there, and they have a rope ladder, and some of them had to be helped just to get up there. Enough strength to pull yourself up.
Did you have the strength? I can't imagine being in the water, that cold water, that long, to still have the strength to climb a rope ladder.
There was guys helping us.
Wow. And they took you down to sick bay and got you into some warm clothes, and you said then you were able to get some sleep, or?
Yeah, when you finally, of course, we'd been on general quarters so much, and we'd been up for so long. We was all tired before this happened.
Yeah.
And them poor guys that was in the chow line, the chow line was way down out in the hangar deck, was way out in that hangar deck, and down one of the stories down to the mess hall. There was a real long line of people, and that fire and that got down.
Is that why you said earlier in the interview luckily you were on duty when it happened?
Right.
Otherwise you would have been in that line.
Right.
Oh boy.
So anyway, after we got picked up, finally, we got loaded onto a tank carrier landing craft.
LST?
LST at Guam, and they took us to Hawaiian Islands, which we didn't know at the time, but they took us out to a place that was all wired in. It had a big tall fence around it all, and it was in the middle of sugar cane area, and nobody knew exactly where in the heck they were or anything, and there was no information. They had some barracks back there, and they issued us some dungarees and clothes to wear, and we was there for 6 weeks or so on this, and come to find out, the skipper was going to charge us with mutiny for leaving that ship. And we was kind of the outlaws that we'd all abandoned ship. We was, and my understanding later on that captain got discharged. He was relieved his duties, and all the charges against all of us was dropped.
So it never got to the point where they started proceedings? It all got stopped before?
It got stopped before. And this captain, like I said, and he had enough guts to go back there and tell it like he was a hero, what he did to save the ship.
Wow.
But the fleet was in jeopardy as long as that ship was there. There was so many people's lives from other battleships and cruisers and destroyers. All these ships was in jeopardy just a few miles off the coast of Japan. And here we got a ship that's and the fleet admiral said abandon this ship, and he wouldn't do it. So they finally, had taken tow, do something, get it out. We was in a bad shape. We could have lost a lot more men than what would have on the Franklin if they'd had the power to do it. But I got out of there, and I got back home. I got another delayed leave, and when they sent me through more gunnery, and got about ready to go back. And the war was getting so close to being over, they decided to send me back to the good old Great Lakes training station there, and retrain me so I could take over groups of people that was getting out of the service. It was so close that they would start discharging sailors to go home that had enough time in, and some of them had been drafted, and some of them had way over their term. And so anyway, I got the last part of my Navy deal was I was in the Navy's training station at New Orleans Naval Air Base in New Orleans, and that's where I got my own discharge papers and got out a day earlier.
Now, were you down there for VJ Day, or where were you when you heard that?
Oh, I was when VJ Day. I was in San Diego, but every time we went ashore anywhere, I was always one of the people that was shore patrol. So I was shore patrol when I was at that gunnery school in San Diego, and so anyway, I was on duty VJ Day in San Diego.
Oh boy!
And it was like the whole fleet was in San Diego. You couldn't believe the servicemen that was in San Diego, and here I am, a shore patrol.
How are you going to control something like that?
So I thought, well, I'm not going to endanger my life. I lived through all this other. So I took my armband off and my belt, hid it underneath the fire escape, and I went and joined the crowd. They was all over. I mean, everybody was so happy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, most happy people you ever seen.
Yeah.
And I don't regret one day of service.
Wow.
But I was proud to have served.
Let me ask you here. I keep referring back to this Kansas farm boy, but here you are. Like I said, you never really traveled all that far away growing up. Now, I mean, through this tape, you've talked about exotic locations like Casablanca, Russia, all over the United States, Hawaii, the South Pacific. What was that like for you to experience all that stuff?
Well, it was, I don't know, it was just, I was always with a big group as a rule, and it was always a new thing. It was everything. Getting to New York, I suppose I probably had a cramp in my neck.
Yeah,
looking
sure,
up.
yeah.
You know,
And when the tallest building in Russell was probably the grain elevator, and and go to see these skyscrapers in New York. I mean,
120 feet was. I could have jumped off that. Wouldn't been any higher than Franklin.
Wow.
So you know, that mill there at Russell, it was probably around. By the way, they used to make flour with Russell Flour Company.
Oh, is that right?
Come out of Russell Milling Company. Anyway, but it was a big thing for a lot. It was young kids, you know, just young kids, and it was all new experience for all of us.
I'll bet. Yeah.
From some of it like was from Brooklyn, and some of it.
Well, that must have been interesting too, to meet different people from different parts of the country.
It was.
Yeah.
Some of it, you know, it's hard to understand. Some kid from Brooklyn, I couldn't make out what they was saying, and they had their own tongue, you know, that they would speak, and I didn't understand it. But as long as you're around it, and every time you get into a different area, why, it's something new. And like I said, every time I went ashore, like when the ship come in, I always had shore patrol duty. I don't know, every time, from the time I got on the Franklin, that was one of the first things, your shore patrol.
Yeah.
So every third day, if you was aboard ship, you'd have a day off. So you could go on your own then.
Yeah.
The rest of the time you was off somewhere making sure there's peace amongst the service guys.
Right.
And it was a very good experience too, shore patrol. A lot of the guys that get in trouble, you know, young drink and all that. I've seen them have to carry sailors back aboard the ship. They was so drunk they couldn't make it, you know. But it was a fun time.
Yeah.
I wished every kid in there would get a little bit of that experience. Young guys, I wish my grandson he's in his 20s now. I wish he could have went through at least a year or two of service.
Yeah.
It would have been good for him.
How was? Let me along those lines. Let me ask you a question from the other side of things. After the war, did your mom ever talk about what she was going through with all you boys off to the service? How she felt about it? And
well, she was pretty proud mom, but she was. She took it all well too, you know, and we all come back in good shape. Other than just a minor little old nick in my leg, the others didn't get hurt, and so we all made it back in fine shape, and we was pretty much a close family, you know, and boy, she welcomed us all home.
Were you able to keep tabs with your other brothers as to when you were overseas, as to how they were doing, or was that news coming from your mom, or were you able to write to each other? I mean,
we never got to correspond with each other. We had to get back to Russell, to my mom, and like somehow or another she got word to my brother that where I was at that I was in the Hawaiian Islands. Somewhere my brother was in the engineers, and he found us, and after so much blue red tape, I was going to say
Go ahead.
anyway, he got to come over and spend a few hours with me there. And when we was anchored at one of the islands one time, I knew my brother's ship was in this convoy, or squadron of planes, not squadron, of ships, all this task force of ships. Well, I knew he was on the Indiana, and I got a chance to have him take me over with one of their small whale boats to his ship, and I got to spend the time with him and got back the next morning. It wasn't long before we sailed on different directions.
I'll be darned. Did you ever run into anybody from home through any of your travels?
No.
No, we didn't? Yeah.
No, you're about the closest one I've seen in my travels when it was strange.
I forgot where we left off. We were talking, I guess, about your brothers and meeting up with them and such. One question I forgot to ask you then, how many people were lost that day on the Franklin? How many were killed? How many injured? Do you have any rough idea on the tolls there?
I think on this tape it shows that there's 800 or 1,200 lost, something like that. I can't remember what the tape, but I think there's near 2,000
Wow.
lost on that ship, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I can't
Did
put
you
a finger on it.
did you lose any?
It's been too long.
Lose any friends that day?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I've lost quite a few friends that day.
Wow.
Other parts of the ship, good friends. And in fact, we had a boat's mate and another gunner's mate. I know it was real good friends. And some of them I've often wondered, never seen or heard anything again from them. And we never got, like I said, we got into this camp.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did they keep you up to date on what was going on and what had happened? So you ever told it?
No, never told nothing. All we got was just like we got issued some clothing, and we could. I don't remember. Just they issued a few bucks where we could go to the canteen and stuff. All we knew we was there waiting on orders, and we never did know what our charges was. We didn't know nothing until later on. Afterwards, we found out we was actually prisoners that we were.
Wow.
So.
Were they, or did they allow you to at least get word to your mom that, hey, I was okay, or?
Yeah, we
okay.
could be able. They had these mail, and it was all censored.
Yeah.
And anything that we said on there that they didn't want us to know, want anybody to know, it was blacked out. It was, and I think they called it V-mail.
The V-mail,
Yeah, and they blacked that stuff out, so we couldn't really say anything other than, well, we're back here in Hawaii, and that's about the same thing but my mother had seen newsreel in the theater about the Franklin. It was on a newsreel, and she knew where I was at.
Oh, wow.
That yeah, it was one of the. You gotta, when you see that tape, it'll just amaze you to something about what all went on. It don't tell nothing about us people that was shoved to that island.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. through the years, have you guys ever had any sort of reunions or anything like that? Any
No,
get-togethers, or
but
have you kept in touch with any of your old shipmates at all?
No, I have run into one, a kid from Hayes. I seen him one time when I was going through Russell. I seen this one kid who was from Hayes. My memory has left his name.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we can try to pull those memories back, but I just can't do that.
Right. Yeah.
So we're all darn lucky that we got out as well as we did, because it could have been a lot worse.
No, sure. How much showcase? So when did you then? You were discharged. You were down in Louisiana when you got discharged.
Well, I went to Great Lakes.
Okay.
And I took some training to be able to get groups of sailors that was ready to be discharged. And I'd have about 20 to 30 in a group and take them through each part of their separation thing, and they had to see the movies, and they had to do every step that they went through and finally it got around where my name come up, and I got that group, and I discharged myself out of the Navy.
Was this still up at Great Lakes?
No, New Orleans.
New Orleans, okay.
When I left Great Lakes, I went to New Orleans Naval Air Base to do the discharge.
Okay. So you didn't run yourself through all those different stages. You just discharged yourself.
Well, I was had in charge of the group.
Oh. So
I didn't tell any of them till any of the people that I was with, the barracks where all us guys stay. I didn't tell any of them that I was in this group to be discharged till after I was discharged. And in fact, some of them thought I left AWOL.
Oh, really? Yeah. So did you come home to Russell from there, or what'd you?
Well, no, I didn't. I had got married when I was down there, and so I went to work in the oil field. And I spent a while down there in the oil field working offshore.
Oh, wow.
And so after that, well, I don't know, that was, marriage was, I had 2 children too, and that was one that didn't work out too well, so I went back to Russell after wife broke up. I went back to Russell and worked out of Russell for Murphy Drilling Company. I worked there for about 20 years. Well, they transferred me. I was one of the ones that they just transferred all over the country. If you had a rig going to wherever, why, I was to take it and go with it. So anyway, why, I got remarried, and we have a family of 4 girls, and my wife passed away 10 years ago. So anyway, we bought us a trailer, and we followed an oil well drilling rig to all over the Nebraska and Colorado and Kansas. We drilled out of Wichita for a long time, then moved out in western Kansas, and then to Sidney, Nebraska, and Kimball and Mitchell, and it was, then moved back to Waukene, Kansas, and Hill City, Kansas, and then back to Sidney. It was, wore the wheels off the motorhome.
I'll be darned. Is that what landed you here in Fort Morgan?
Yeah, I moved over here 32 years ago. Right here to this house, and
Is
I
that
haven't
right?
moved since.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I went to work over here for J.W. Gibson Oil Company. He had a well servicing company. I went to work for him for 20 years.
Boy, all told,
27 years.
all told, how many years did you work in the oil industry? He
Well,
added it all up.
I didn't retire till after Jim Gibson died, and that was in '04. So I'm 70 some years old. I didn't start drawing Social Security till after I was 70.
Huh.
I,
But if you added
I
it up,
enjoyed my work.
if you added it up, how many years were you altogether did you work in the oil industry? Between
All my life.
I'll be darned.
That's the only thing I ever done, except for one summer when I quit working for Murphy. I worked one summer on highway department. They was building the interstate through Kimball and Sydney and there. I worked on that highway thing. I did about everything. I didn't join the union, so I got to do about anything I thought I was big enough to do. Run cats and loaders and cranes and or whatever the foreman wanted. Oh, is Swede, can you do this? I haven't, but I'll sure try.
I'll be darned.
And they wanted me to come back the next year after they shut down in the fall. And they wanted me to come back. I said, no, I'm back in the oil field.
Yeah.
So that's when I went to work between the time I quit Murphy and went to work for J.W. Gibson. 27 years with J.W. Gibson.
I'll be done. Well, Swede, we'll start to wind down this interview. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, or any stories that you can think of that you want to add to this tape, so we make sure we fill it up as best we can with everything?
Well, I like a little bit of some of the things I had, like when I was in North Africa, in Casablanca and Oran, Algiers, and up there when we picked up prisoners and stuff. I got quite a few souvenirs from German prisoners.
We'll film that. We'll get that here at the end of the interview. I just wonder if there's any stories any questions I didn't ask you wanted to talk about, or any stories that you're thinking of now that we didn't talk.
Well, not really. I just think it's, I think I've probably said enough. You know, I probably already talked too long, and it's sometimes hard to bring back the memories of some of the
well, that's
things
60 some odd years ago.
Yeah,
that's understandable.
Ruth was by earlier today and was talking about it, and I said, "My God, that was 64 years ago."
Sure. Yeah.
We was talking about, I don't know, some date on something. I said, "My God, that was 64 years ago. I don't quite remember all of it."
Yeah.
And my kids, I think they would have liked for me to talk a lot more than I ever did about it.
Well, we've got it down on tape now, though.
But I never have really told them exactly.
Yeah.
Now they've seen the movies and stuff. I know they've asked lots of questions. But I wasn't never mistreated. The one thing good, I was never a prisoner.
Yeah.
So other than,
you were for a short period there, really.
Yeah, but I wasn't treated like that.
Yeah, right.
And I enjoyed I can say I enjoyed the service, and I think it taught me to be able to take orders. I might not like them, but I can take orders, and I could also later on give the orders. And when I did, I tried to be fair, and I was hoping everybody would be the same thing.
Well, that is along the lines of one of the last questions I always like to ask when I do these interviews. How do you think that period of time, what kind of role did that play in your life? Change your life, affect your life? Or did it? Was it just simply just a 3 or 4 year period of your life?
I was so young when I went in there, other than working. Well, I just started trying to work in the summertime in the oil field. just trying. I was a young kid. My mother even had to sign a thing so I could, for the insurance company, so I could work in the oil field.
Yeah.
I was just starting that, and of course you get all the, just a young kid, and I'm the youngest one on the cruise, and that I get all the dirty work and the, hand me this and do that and go do all the chores. Everything was but I had learned to kind of take direction. And when I went into the service, I really then learned to take direction, do what I was told, don't give anybody any guff, and it seemed like I got along better than a lot of them. They would talk back to be able to, instead of just doing it. Well, some of them got in trouble, and most generally they went to the mess hall and done either that, or they was mopping the floors in the barracks or whatever when they was in boot camp, and just learn to take orders and not fight about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard for somebody that's never been, but my mother, like I say, when she told us what we had to do, we done our chores. We had those chores. We had to do those chores, even just as kids. She had a farm to run, and my older brothers, they're quite a bit older than me, and I was the youngest. And like I say, I was the one that got the hand downs from the clothing to everything else, so I was pretty well equipped for it when it come to being able to take the orders of what I was to do, and the hardest thing I ever done in my life was go down. We had to get punishment. My mother make me go down to the currant bush and cut off a twig and bring it to her, the green currant bush, and bring it to her, and she'd swat my behind with it. Now it's pretty hard to go down there and get your own stick to get switched with. Now, that's hard to do.
What was harder, going down knowing you're getting the stick that's going to get hit with, or getting hit with that stick?
Well, it wasn't that bad. It was, God, I don't want to get too big. But if I don't, I'm going to get sent back to get right. And it seems like it's hard to do something when you know you're going to be punished. And that was one of the hardest things to do, is to go get that switch. And it had to be right, because if it was just a little switch, well, you was going to get it used a little bit harder for not doing it right the first time. So, anyway, well, it was good life. Good life. Well, and I'll enjoy this trip too.
Oh, you will.
I'll be with a bunch of guys that probably like it. Sometime they probably got some old reminiscing to do.
The trip you're talking about, for those that'll watch this tape, is the honor flight that you're taking to Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Or this honor flight. It'll be a good trip for me.
Good. Very good.
And I hope Bob Dole's there, so I'll visit with him a minute or two.
You bet.
Get a little time. It'd be good. So.
Well, Swede, we'll shut off this interview. Is there anything you can think of? Is there a closing statement you'd like to make, or anything you'd like to say to anybody that's going to watch this tape, just to finalize and finish off this interview, or not?
Oh, maybe I think probably I've said too much already. I want to thank all my family. And first, that I want to thank you for coming by.
That's the least of mine. Nothing.
I want to thank all my family, and I want them to know that there was probably a lot of things they didn't know before. They should they'll probably see it here, so
Yeah.
that'll be fine.
Very good. Well, Swede, I want to thank you for sitting down to tell your story today, but more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
You betcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, there isn't really. I don't think I have any of my. I don't think I have hardly any of the ribbons that was before. I think I went to the Pacific. I think the biggest part of that's.
Yeah, it was taken in San Diego, so maybe when you guys came through the canal and first stopped in San
Yeah.
Diego, probably?
Probably, I don't know, but it was before we had any of the Franklin duty, I think.
Okay.
That was, I think, it's all Atlantic.
Okay. Swede.
Oh, this here's our initiation when we went across the equator. They called us pollywogs up until the time you went across the, and then you're a shellback, boy, you're old salt sailor. They give you a certificate of it, and when the date was, and it was September the 20th of 1944. And I don't remember what the occasion was, but I know there was always a big celebration every time we went across there, and we had new people aboard the ship.
It was quite an initiation, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's some of it that got pretty rough at times. They'd run you through paddle lines and all that kind of stuff. Even the officers, you know, some of the officers really, and they get mad as a rule because some of the sailors were swatting their butt with a paddle, and it made some of the officers kind of mad, but they went through it and they lived through it, and we all had a wonderful time, enjoyed every minute of that type of things, entertainment we got aboard the ship. Okay, this picture here is the gun turret that I was at after the ship was hit, and I had got off at the present time. This was right after it got off. All the crews got off and out of that turret, and we jumped overboard.
So this is your turn here, and then you guys just jumped?
Yeah, it's about 120 feet, something like that, down to the water. And I made sure everybody else was out of there, and I went off. And that's when I spent 5 hours in the water. This picture here was taken of the ship. I was in the water at that time, and you can see some of the planes and stuff that's still on the deck, and the smoke and the fire that's going on. The biggest part of it's up around that gun turret at that time, and where the gasoline and all that is. But all these planes later on, all of them here, it's on the flight deck, they'll catch a fire and all that. Explosions, there's bombs and everything on those planes.
Now, is your turret on this side of the ship? Is it,
Well,
where would you be in relation to that picture, roughly? Or is it even in the picture?
yeah, you can't see the turret on.
It's in right in there?
It's in that.
Oh,
It's in the
geez.
fire. You can see it on from that other picture. You can see how the fire was around that, and you can still see some of the planes that's on the deck on that other picture. Okay, this watch here is what I had on my arm. It had a leather band on it at that time, and I carried that. It's turned, but I had that on when I went into the water. It wasn't waterproof or anything, and it's stopped there 20 minutes till 8, I think, but I'm not sure if that's the time that it was. This is something I carried with me at all times. I carried it on my belt with a little shower curtain snap I had, and I always carried it on the belt loop so I'd have something to tinker with when I was playing around with some of the things in the gun turret, or just when I needed some little thing to tighten more than finger tight. Well, I'd use that around.
Is it something you'd carry with you the rest of your life? Did you carry it years after the war, or just something?
No, just
oh, okay.
When I went overboard.
Oh, okay.
That was the last time I carried it.
I'll be darned.
So, anyway, I can say that was some of the memorability I brought back with me. So
The Franklin.
okay, and here on this side here, we got a bunch of coins, and these here are all German coins that some of the prisoners had, and I probably traded them something, a cigarette or some darn thing for these coins. And this particular coin, I was in North Africa in one of the towns. I don't know remember whether it was Oran or Algiers, maybe even Bone, when we was get on the dock or shore, and we'd be able to get into the little towns there. Why, the sailor didn't have American money, and when he handed it to him, he'd get change back. There never was any means of telling what you had, but the coins that you'd get, well, you didn't know what they was anyway. So I looked at this one particular coin, and it looked like it had Star David onto it. And I looked in that coin over, and I seen a date onto it. It said 1340. So I decided I am going to keep that coin. Well, when the Franklin was hit, luckily where I had my locker and all that on the board ship, it wasn't destroyed.
Oh, is that right? Made it through the...
It made it through the bombing.
And you eventually got all your stuff back down the road?
When I went back to Hawaii, I got back aboard that old ship before they took us to the cane fields. And so I had all these coins and stuff with me on board that ship, and so I saved all this stuff, and this is some of the things I brought back with me. And I always thought that coin was one of my precious things I wanted to keep all my life.
Sure.
So
Huh.
my kids will probably use it more than I would. They have to show it off.
Yeah, sure.
They've seen it a lot. They enjoy it.